Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Noxcast, an Equinox News Recap podcast. I'm your host, Charlotte King. I'm the managing executive editor of the Equinox.
And I'm Nathan Hope, the administrative executive editor of the Equinox. And this week we are joined by ourselves. We don't have a guest, but we do have a couple exciting announcements in regard to what's been going on with the Equinox and with Noxcast specifically.
Yeah, it's our first episode back after winter break, and I'm super excited to announce that we are working on getting the podcast onto streaming services. So currently, if you go to Spotify or iHeartRadio or the Podbean app, our podcast is currently available in audio form, which is super exciting. I've been really looking forward to being able to launch that. It's not currently available on Apple Podcasts, unfortunately, but we are currently working on making it available over there. It just takes a little bit of extra processing time to submit it and get it approved, but I have submitted it, and so hopefully within the next couple weeks or so, Apple Podcast listeners will be able to enjoy as well. The other big happening at the Equinox as we are coming back from break is I finally got to debut something that we've been working on for a while that I've been really pushing for since the previous school year, which is I really wanted to expand our news coverage more into the realm of technology news. And this week, our first paper back, we did a special section on a couple pages of the paper that usually would contain our region and state section that we always go over as part of our news recap, where we usually source articles from the Granite State News Collaborative. We did still have a couple of articles from the collaborative, one in our news section and one in the tech section. But in this case, we dedicated those pages more specifically to focusing on tech news on campus and just sort of in the region of education, USNH, sort of relevant realm. But yeah, this is something that I've been so passionate about expanding the Equinox's coverage with, because I'm a big fan of tech journalism. I'm super fascinated by just always keeping up with what's new in that kind of whole world. And I read a lot of tech news. So the opportunity, I've done some tech reporting for our news section in the past, but the opportunity to really focus in on that, because tech is such a common, universal part of our lives, of the lives of every student, faculty member, staff member, everybody on this campus. I really feel like it's an area where we can afford to kind of take the time and say, let's take a closer look at some of the big issues in that realm, at least, from time to time. My hope is eventually maybe we can make this a more regular thing. But for now, yeah, it was just super cool to finally see it in print. And on that note, I think we can go ahead and start our news recap off with the top story from that tech section, which was a piece about the TikTok ban, which is obviously kind of a high-profile issue. There's been a lot of discussion about it, especially among people who are in the kind of typical demographic to be a college student. And so this was kind of a rundown by our senior reporter, Ryan Pacheco, just giving students kind of the info about what happened. Why was TikTok banned? Why was this something that people... why was it brought to the table in the first place, and what are we looking at going forward? And so I thought that this was, I've been following the TikTok ban throughout this whole kind of saga of people saying it's going away, it's going to get banned, and then the temporary actual enforcement of the ban on TikTok's part, or I should say on ByteDance's part, the company that owns TikTok, and then the reversal of it within, what was it, 14 hours. and sort of the political, implications and fallout of that. So, seeing kind of that more digestible rundown and summarizing what people need to know in order to kind of continue their use of social media in an informed way. I thought that was a really valuable way of taking a look at it.
Yeah, that's why I also kind of thought that this would be the perfect week to really get a jump start on the tech section, was because TikTok really was the biggest story in the country just in general for, at least a couple days there, on whether, how the Biden administration would handle it on the way out, how the new Trump administration would approach it, the actuality of the extension, if that's binding compared to what Congress passed, et cetera, et cetera. But it was really a pretty good, concise rundown, and sort of also gave some perspective into, some Keene State specific things. Also talking to marketing about, TikTok is part of their social media strategy in terms of bringing in new students, and, they place advertisements on TikTok, and sort of how that impacts them, if at all, was also covered in the article. It's the impacts of at least that temporary ban, and then the uncertainty, and then now still some uncertainty about who's going to buy the platform, if there's going to be an agreement reached within this new 75-day extension. Obviously, the app is still unavailable on app stores for those who don't already have it. If you do have it, you can still access it now. There's just a lot of miscommunication about and some misinformation out there, I think, about the ban itself, what it means. So I think this was a great story to start off the tech section with. And for those who are interested in this story or the other stories that came out in the section, I wanted to throw out there that, this won't be a one-time thing. We're planning on keeping this thing going in future weeks when we can. And I'm definitely share the excitement about it.
Yeah, and those articles are all available on our site at kscequinox.com, the same way that any other section is. It's right on the homepage. We added a tab for it. And yeah, like Nate said, definitely continuing to keep it going is the goal, especially when it feels like every other day there's a new, certain, not of this magnitude. Again, the TikTok thing is so high profile, but every other day there's some kind of tech story that is on people's minds, because social media is on people's minds. We're such creatures of the internet at this point that like there's always going to be something that is relevant in that way. But I think one of the big things that really interests me about tech journalism and wanting to pursue that further as something we integrate into our coverage is like finding the points where it intersects with other kinds of reporting. And so with something like this, when it comes to you have the tech side of things with like the actual material, like what is happening with it being taken down from the app stores, or the enforcement of the ban, anything like that. But also you get into the business side of things when you're talking about, okay, who's a prospective buyer of TikTok? You get into political conversations, obviously, because of how heavily this is a talked about issue, bipartisan issue in legislation. And I really think that that's kind of, I think this is an opportunity to also get into our editorial, because we also, we focused kind of a lot of attention on TikTok this week, because again, it's just, I genuinely think that like you'd be hard pressed to find somebody on campus who doesn't have a feeling on it as a student. It's just, it dominates the conversation. But from my perspective, I really think it almost gets into territory of talking about like journalism itself, because we are, our goal is so intent upon the practice and preservation of free speech. And this TikTok ban is at its core, I think, a free speech issue. And that's kind of what we got into with our editorial discussion. I think we had a really good discussion with the e-board. I was very pleased with how sort of in-depth everybody talked about this. But, the idea that like the government, the legislators who have pushed for this ban to be implemented, regardless of whether or not it's being enforced. I think it's really a matter of, trying to control the narratives that are prominent on TikTok, and it becomes this issue where the sort of scapegoat here is ByteDance as a company that operates in China, and therefore is deemed a potential national security threat. And I'm certainly, I'm not going to say that that's impossible, but I also think that there's just overall a rather uninspiring amount of evidence to suggest that that is truthful. I think a lot of it comes from scaremongering or just kind of that almost like Cold War anxiety that never fully left like the spirit of America, which I know, seems a little extreme when we're talking about an app, the app where people do funny dances, but it's true. Like it's a very diverse and effective ecosystem of communication. And to shut that down on the basis that maybe it's a threat, well, I don't know about everybody else, but I'm looking for a little more than a maybe, especially when we already know for a fact that so many other social media corporations like Meta, or even, outside the social media sphere, I mean, pretty much any app that you have on your phone, anything that like reads your credit card, our data is constantly leaking, as you go about your daily life. And so I think that, kind of one of the core points we hit on is that it's not fair, in essence, to hit specifically on TikTok, when there's so many other offenders, and in many cases offenders where we have even more evidence. And I'll let you talk a little bit more about this because I know this is one of the points that you really wanted to hit on with the editorial, but I do think that we're applying a totally incorrect Band-Aid to a problem that already can't be fixed by a Band-Aid, and that is the fact that we need better privacy protection in America. Like that is the real fix that's going to prevent these, national security concerns or just privacy concerns in general from blowing up into that bigger issue that many are claiming TikTok is already causing it to be.
Yeah, I just think that in terms of, singling out TikTok is just kind of unfair given the offenders being basically every other social media platform, website, etc. I mean, it's easier to do it that way from a government standpoint when you have so many legislators who are, maybe rightfully afraid given, the threat and having money in politics, going after basically these big tech companies. And something like widespread privacy regulations and legislation would obviously threaten their ability to build out these algorithms more than they already have, and whatever they do with your information, mainly, of course, selling it to brokers, et cetera, et cetera. It'd be hard for Congress and it's hard to imagine Congress really taking that step and really standing up to big business in that way. Unfortunately, it's easier to single out this, it's owned by a Chinese company. And I think, unfortunately, Congress did a very bad job at explaining in specifics what TikTok is doing that's either the same or worse than American companies. Any of the concrete evidence of what China or the Chinese Communist Party is doing with said data, if that is happening. A lot of just vague posturing. And if you look at some of these hearings with the TikTok CEO, you have a lot of, frankly, uneducated people in government who don't really understand how TikTok works, how some social media platforms work, as evidenced by some of the questions, which, it's hard to end up having to take the side of a massive tech CEO, but seeing sort of him having to respond to these questions about, can TikTok recognize your pupil dilation when you look at a video and then collect that data to see what your content you're into? It's very strange to see, and that wasn't the only question that was kind of out of bounds, really. And it kind of just goes to show that they're not really interested in actually getting educated and tackling the root cause of, misuse of data, selling data, privacy concerns, really just concerned with, singling out China as the enemy, and then sort of that whole, Cold War mindset really again. But yeah, we had a really good discussion about that. And I think also from a journalist perspective, it's hard too. And, the Equinox doesn't have a TikTok account at the moment, but, we always want to have as many ways as possible to get the news out there. This podcast is one of the ways that we want to make the news more accessible to people, to have video and audio and the print and whatever we can do. Short form video is a big way that people get their news, whether we like it or not. That's what, we have to adapt to in the journalism industry. Things aren't just all print all day anymore. And I think taking away one of those big sources of how people get news is also very detrimental. I don't think that Meta or YouTube Shorts or some of the other competitors to TikTok really have the infrastructure built, or the audiences specifically to those segments of their platforms that kind of correlate with the effect that TikTok has in having some pretty prominent news organizations having popular TikTok accounts. And, these are credible news organizations that just want to put out their content in a different way. And I think it's a very valuable platform in that way. And I think sort of, again, arbitrarily singling it out just isn't the way to go. And the board agreed with those sentiments.
Yep. All right. I think that will do it for our summary of sort of the combined discussion around the tech top story and the editorial, which means we can loop back around and move into our news top story from this week, which is covering the fact that the Career Services Director, Kristen Brooks, has left Keene State College. And so now there's a little bit of just the typical uncertainty as to, whether that position will remain exactly as it was and be filled by someone else, or if there will be like some, more long-term restructuring. But for the time being, they do have somebody else filling in on that position. But just in general, I think, with any departure from the college, I think our hope would primarily just be that the office in question, department in question, whatever it may be, can kind of find a balance that works for everybody. Because, even in the event where maybe the position is restructured, whatever changes might occur, like, maximizing kind of that like comfortable workflow to continue providing services to like the campus as a whole is always sort of the end goal.
Yeah, I think, every department on campus is certainly important for the continued orderly function of the college, but career services in particular, given that college is really the time to prepare you to get into the professional world and to your desired career. Certainly an important aspect of campus to look at and to work to, fill the position as reasonably quick as possible. Make sure that, of course, staff don't feel as though they're overworked or stretched too thin. because that's, detrimental to everybody in terms of, when appointments are being able to be made or, just added stress. So obviously, we hope to see it filled in a reasonable time frame, and it's important. With stories about vacancies, we also cover, of course, when people are hired into those positions, and we want just the campus to know, hey, this is sort of an area of importance and something to look at. This is something that students care about, or we think students care about as the student voice of Keene State College. So it's an important story to get that out there. As with any vacancy or hiring story, just general things moving around in the college matters to students.
Right. I think, well, I'll speak for myself anyway, that I think it can sometimes feel a little awkward when we're reporting on a departure from the college, just because, you never know, like, how people are feeling about it or whatever. And so you just kind of want to, like, approach it mindfully. But yeah, totally, like, it's the kind of thing where we come at it from the mindset of, like, this has potential relevance to the people who are reading our paper, because, any position is going to affect the daily, like, workflows and just lives of everybody else on campus. And so we're equally, ready to report on any new hires, or like I said, any kind of restructuring like that, because those, apply the same way. That affects everybody in a similar kind of almost ripple effect. And so, that awkwardness can sometimes be there, but it's all part of the overall campus environment. And now moving into our top student life story from the week, we had kind of another, like, fun, offbeat, what are students thinking sort of story that came from our opinions editor, Jaden Johnson. And this one was talking about when students most are likely to decide to cut class. And, it's the kind of thing where, like, not everybody wants to admit it, but, like, I feel like there's a pretty decent percentage of people who have at least done it once, and kind of one of the big questions ended up being morning versus evening as sort of general categories, because I feel like, the energy level that you're at can be so different, and it almost kind of comes down to, like, are you a morning person, or are you maybe somebody who kind of gets that second wind later in the day? But so overall, the findings seem to be pretty split. So I guess it's just that it kind of depends on, like, everybody's overall, like, personal way of doing things and preference, your internal rhythm or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's like if you're planning to skip something, then it's like, so the question itself is really like, would you rather start the day later and then sort of just keep on going with the rest of your schedule after, like, an 8 a.m., for example, or, cut the last class of the day and then be done with the day earlier? So I think it really could go either way. And I think, it's an interesting story because, yeah, people unfortunately skip class. And it's kind of good, I think, to get insight into the reasonings for that, and, when maybe, and then, just like there's a lot to it. And I think she did a good job, especially with surveying so many different students. I think up to 100. Really good in getting a lot of response and feedback based on that. And great job with the piece.
I love when we do a good survey story. Maybe it's the tiny little part of me, the tiny evil part that loves, like, statistics. But I like when I get to see a percentage in the story, However, I think it was, like, just over 50% of students. And so, like, being able to kind of break it down like that, And obviously, we can't always get as big of a sample size as like some, big fancy like research or study or whatever. But yeah, 100 is like it's pretty decent sample size overall
Sure.
to report on. So yeah, cool stuff.
For sure.
I think we can now move into our top A&E story for the week, which this is another really cool one. I was really excited for this because I had noticed while we were still, it was like one of the last days of break, and I noticed there was an Instagram account that popped up in my like, who you should follow or whatever. That was, it's called, I think they're called KSC underscore VGE. And I was like, who's this? I haven't noticed this before. And I looked at it and saw that it was a video game music ensemble, which towards the end of last semester, we had done a story about a video game music performance, like a one-off performance that was organized by a student in collaboration with some fellow music students and sort of overseen by a music faculty member. And that was a really cool story because, as we've said before on the show, like we're always looking out for projects that students are doing, unique ideas or opportunities that people are working on, because it's just such a cool, I think it's such a testament to like the creativity and passion of people who have found a field that they just really love and really want to work on. And so that was a cool story. And now this is a cool story that there's actually like a whole ensemble dedicated to performing video game music. And it's entirely made up of first years, which is also cool. Just the fact that, these are people who are still relatively new to the community and already here they are like starting from the ground up their own group to perform in. But I also just think it's cool. I'm somebody who enjoys video game music. I think that it's a sort of underestimated form of composition, because just like with a film score or anything similar to that, you really have to take into account the atmosphere and just like kind of tones and colors, if you will, of the scene or setting that you're working with in the game. And so I think it's really cool both to kind of give respect to that area of composition and bring that to life on the stage, but then also just have the opportunity for new, not even necessarily just new students, but music students in general who maybe have an appreciation for that kind of music to have the opportunity to engage with it very directly as part of their experience in college. It's a way to, I think, really bring people in and get them excited about performing.
Yeah, it's just, people, prospective first-year students in particular, really, I think they look for things at a college that really sets it apart from others. And I think it's really cool how students kind of can create those things that you don't see, at every other college. You'll probably see at a bunch of other colleges something like brass ensemble, woodwinds, but, a video game ensemble, that's a new creative idea that could potentially bring in some students who might look at that and be like, I can't get this elsewhere. And it really is such a big part of, video games. And, there's things like, the Super Mario Brothers theme where, you turn that on, everybody knows that, but people don't realize how sort of culturally significant, I guess, it can be. And yeah, it's really cool that they started this up, and I'm glad for the opportunity that it presents for others to be able to partake in it.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I thought was really cool too, because I've been talking about the opportunities this opens up for music students, but I believe it's open to anybody who plays an instrument. So I really think it has the potential to kind of turn out to be to bring in a crowd and really show appreciation for something that, like you say, can be so just like culturally kind of recognizable and significant. So definitely, whenever the next performance comes up, I will certainly make the effort to be there. All right. And with that, I think we can talk about our top sports story from the week, which is covering the KSD dance team, which recently went down and competed in Florida as part of the Universal Dance Association national competition, which is by my understanding, a pretty big deal. And, one of the things I thought was really cool about this, Jacob Ensko, our sports editor who did this article, kind of highlighted the fact that our dance team, when they go to this competition, as they have in years previous, gets the chance to kind of witness and mingle with Division I dance competitors. And so that's kind of a cool opportunity to sort of see how people who really go every year and bring it are operating, maybe how they're doing things over there. And so I think that's a cool learning experience, and also just like bonding between people who clearly just love dance so much. So I thought that was a really nice kind of spotlight on them. We're always happy when we get to talk about stuff that's more on like the club sports side, because there can be a lot of focus that's put onto like men's basketball, and rightly so in many cases. But yeah, super cool. And they ended up placing, I think, 6th in the open game day category and 18th in the open hip hop category. So getting on the board. And so congrats to them. Super cool.
Yeah, it's really cool to see things like this where it's really the culmination of so much hard work and being able to go to, a national stage and really interact with people that are, in these upper divisions. Something you don't see in, the NCAA, varsity sports. Having, the lack of barriers there is really cool to witness. And it's awesome that they did pretty well, all things considered. And just being able to highlight these sort of lesser looked at times sports is just a really cool thing. I'm glad we got that coverage.
Yeah, for sure. And with that, I think that wraps up yet another Equinox News recap. Thank you so much for watching or listening to Noxcast. As I said, Apple viewers, be on the lookout, because that should be coming to you on Apple Podcasts pretty soon. And we're very excited about that. I also, as always, want to extend a very special thanks to the composer of the music for Noxcast, our very own Equinox alum, Zach Keenan, as well as the designer of the graphic for Noxcast, our very own art director, promotion alert, Elijah Fisher, and the editor of Noxcast, our very own multimedia director, Jakob Hall. We will be back again next week, probably with a guest. Count on that. But until then, thank you. And I've been Charlotte King.
And I've been Nathan Hope. Thank you for watching.